Hi guys, it's Jess from Honest Fiction, and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be sharing things that I would like to see more of in fantasy romance and contemporary romance books. Alright guys, so this video is actually a collab that was put together by Beck from Beck's Reads. So I will leave her video along with everyone else who is participating down in the description below. So once you're finished watching this video, definitely check out everybody else's. But Beck's reached out and asked if I was interested in sharing things I would like to see more in romance books. So whether it be tropes or just anything that would make a romance a 5-star read that I haven't been seeing recently. I hope that made sense. But anyway, I'm so excited to share my answers. So if you are unfamiliar with my channel, I post new videos every Wednesday and Sunday. If you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. You can also hit the notification bell to be notified whenever I post new bookish content. You can also check out my Instagram and Goodreads, both linked down below. With all that out of the way, let's talk about things I wish we could see more in fantasy romance and contemporary romance books. All right, so I'm actually going to start off with the topic that I am most passionate about. I was going to save this for the end, but this is the first thing that came to mind when I was taking notes for this video, and it's something I wish I saw more in both fantasy romance and romance, and that is older female main characters or more mature female main characters. So typically when I read fantasy romance, the people we are following or the female main character we are following are normally in their late teens, sometimes early 20s, and occasionally I would like to follow a character that has lived a life, who has had a past, and is able to use critical thinking skills and is just a little bit more mature. So the first thing that comes to mind is Between Wrath and Mercy by Jess Wisecup. So it was so refreshing reading that book because one, we are following a character that is essentially a single mother, so we get that whole dynamic, and I feel like that's kind of unique for fantasy romance, but also she's a little bit older, she's in her 30s, and it was so interesting seeing her reflect on the past in order to help her make decisions in the present, because she does have a past to reflect on. I feel like when we're reading fantasy romance, if the character is 16, she doesn't have a lot to look back on to help her kind of make these decisions, and they tend to be a little bit more impulsive. And don't get me wrong, I love younger fantasy romance characters. I mean, Throne of Glass is one of my favorites, and I'm pretty sure Aelin is supposed to be like 16 years old. But occasionally I would like an older character, and also with contemporary romance, I'm in my 30s, so I would love to read a romance with the main character being in her 30s, and I feel like most of the ones I read end up just being like reverse age gap, where it's like an older woman and a younger guy. I would just like both characters to be a little bit older, and I would be so happy. So I feel like that is really a need in the romance genre, just having slightly older characters, because older people need love too, and there are older readers out there that would really appreciate seeing themselves on the page. So this next one might be a little bit controversial, and it's actually not something I'd like to see more of, it's something I would like to see less of, and that is epilogues. Now, I love a good epilogue, however, they are getting very, very repetitive, and 9 times out of 10, we are following the couple that had their HEA, and they're either finding out they're pregnant or they're having their second baby, and things of that nature, and I just feel like we don't always need that. I feel like it's kind of pushing this like narrative that to have an HEA, you have to have a baby, and I just don't think that is necessarily the case. Nothing against that at all in any way. It's just, I feel like there are a lot of families out there and couples out there that get married, they don't have kids, they still have their HEA. So I feel like those epilogues sometimes just aren't needed, and they can be kind of discouraging sometimes. So I feel like I would love to have more romance books just have their HEA, get over whatever hurdles or miscommunication they have to get over, and not necessarily have to start a family during the epilogue. Like maybe they just live happily ever after themselves and then end the book. So that is a personal thing just for me. I understand a lot of people out there absolutely love those epilogues, and I'm so happy for you guys. Personally, they just don't work for me. But yeah, that is something I wish I saw more, is just like ending the book and not having that extra epilogue. And next up is specific for fantasy romance, and that is love interests in fantasy romance. You have to admit, they're looking a little similar. So I read a lot of fantasy romance so far this year, and I will tell you, most of the love interests have black hair, tattoos, and are brooding and secretly have a good heart. And I'm all about that. Look, I love a guy with tattoos and abs and dark hair, all about it. However, it's getting a little repetitive. Like most of the fan art I'm seeing, I am having trouble differentiating which love interest goes to which book just because they're all so similar. So I'm hoping moving forward, we get a little bit more diversity. We get some different love interests, maybe like a goofy love interest, red-headed love interest, different nationalities, change it up a little bit. Cause like it's becoming a lot. And this is coming from someone who loves dark hair and tattoos. And next up is something that I feel is very important in the romance genre, whether it be fantasy or contemporary. And it's something that's been fading recently, and that is longing. So Crystal from Crystal's Bookish Life, she posted a story on Instagram probably about a month ago where she was talking about how a lot of romance books just don't have that like utter longing and you wanting these two people to be together. And personally for me, I feel like a lot of romance books I've been picking up, there is a little bit of that in the very beginning and then it fades away and we're really not getting that like slow burn, that tension, and just the feeling that these two people need to be together. And that's something I wish I saw a lot more. Like I said, when I first started picking up romance, I feel like it was very frequent, and that's really what kept me hooked in a romance book, was just seeing these two people struggle and do everything to be together and just not being able to imagine these two people being separated. A Court of Mist and Fury really like has that sort of feeling. And I feel like we don't get longing very much now in a lot of romances, and that's something that I really hope starts to come back. And next up is something I've noticed recently with fantasy romance, and I really hope that it continues, and that is just dropping you into a fantasy romance world and you figuring it out as you go. So I feel like two books that do this are Serpent and the Wings of Night and Fourth Wing, where instead of like SJM type books where there's like a lot of info being thrown at you and the very beginning of the book is very info dumpy, these types of books kind of just like put you into the world and are like, okay, figure it out for yourself. And honestly, I prefer that because I come from an age now of like TikTok and instant gratification, and it takes a lot for me to get through world building these days. So I don't know what that says about me, but I much prefer just like getting to the action and slowly figuring out the world as I go, as opposed to just getting a bunch of info about a world and having to try to reference that later in the book. So that is something I wish I could, or I hope to continue to see in fantasy romance. All right, so this next one is a little bit of something I want to see less, but then something I also want to see more of. So, miscommunication. I understand it's never going to go away. It's always going to be there. Authors utilize this so much for the third act breakup. However, I would love to see a couple that has miscommunication and then they figure out a way to effectively communicate. Whether we get to see them go to therapy or just learn how to talk it out. I feel like that is something we don't see very often in romance books, is these two people learning how to communicate with each other, because that is something that is so difficult to do and something that a lot of couples really struggle with in the beginning is effective communication, getting their points heard and understanding each other. So I would love to see more romance books that show us these two people kind of learning that. And I feel like that might be boring for a lot of people, but it's something that like I find really interesting and I think would really add to a romance. So that is something I wish I saw a little bit more. And next up is more inclusive romances. So I feel like modern day romances are doing a better job of this, featuring characters that are marginalized that we don't typically see in romances. However, there's a long way to go. So one of my favorite authors is Chloe Liese. She has the Bergman Brothers series. If you have not read that series yet, it is absolutely phenomenal. One of my favorites. And my favorite book in that series is Always Only You. And the main female main character is on the autism spectrum and she is suffering from arthritis. And those are two things I, up until reading that book, hadn't seen in romance books. And it was so amazing and just heartwarming to follow this character. I work in a school that deals with like applied behavioral analysis. And it was so interesting. And I feel like Chloe Liese also does a really good job of fact checking and actually putting out accurate information. I recently read a monster romance that featured a main character that had a prosthetic limb, and then The Words by A. Jade. That book made me sob. So it features a character that when he's younger, he is diagnosed with dyslexia, and I have adult dyslexia, which I don't talk about very often, but it's something that I struggle with daily, and typically if I ever see it brought up, it's for a child being diagnosed. And no one really talks about having it as an adult, and it is referenced in The Words. And I was like, oh, yay, there's someone that's like me on the page, and I really enjoyed that. So just keeping that going and seeing more characters that we don't typically see and just more inclusion would be amazing. And next up is a minor thing that I really hope I see more going forward in contemporary romance books, and that is half-naked guys on the cover. So I feel like recently, over the last 2 years or so, a lot of romance authors are going the discreet cover route, and a lot of those books look exactly the same. It's a bunch of flowers and the title. And while I love a good like flowery book, and some of them are very pretty, I liked when we got to see the love interests on the cover. So, for example, The Bully by Sophie Lark. I'm obsessed with this cover. I prefer this cover to the discreet cover just because like I want to see Dean in all his glory on the front of this. So this is the original cover, and then the new cover is still really cool. It's not as good. I don't know. It's just, I want Dean. So I really hope that we can start going back to the half-naked guys on the cover. I will read these books out in public with no shame, but I totally understand that there are people out there that like prefer the discreet cover. But anyway, that is something I hope goes back and we get to see more original covers. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching. Those are all the things I wish I could see more in romance books. Please let me know down in the comments below if there's anything you would like to see moving forward in romance books and in the romance genre. Now, I said this already, this is a collab, so I will have everyone else's videos down in the description below. And I also said this already, I post new videos every Wednesday and Sunday, and if you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. I will see you all next week. Bye!